How you doing? My name is Chris. Welcome to my shop. In the past, I have shown you how to mix and make your own shellac, how to mix and make your own varnish for an HVLP gun, also how to mix and make your own beeswax finish, and I even did a little brief series on how to make your own iron acetate and color and things of that nature for your own homemade wood stain. And I have a playlist here on my channel that if any of this interests you, you can go check that out. But I've got a different type of finish or variation to a finish that I want to show you today. So if you'll stick around, we'll get to that next. All right, before I get to the finish, I'm going to show you how to mix and make yourself today. I want to talk to you about surface prep. And by surface prep, I mean sanding of your wood. And today I'm using a piece of, I believe it's elm that my buddy Jason McGinn sent me. But the important thing to know is how to correctly sand this prior to applying the finish that we're going to be using today. And primarily what we're going to be doing today is I'm going to be showing you how to make a wipe-on finish. And typically finishes like that are very thin. And the reason for that is that you want them to absorb into the wood. If you sand a piece of wood up to, say, beyond 220, if you go above 220 and your grit to make, you're sanding up to 600 or 420, 320, you're closing off the pores of the wood and you're preventing the finish from doing what it's intended to do, which is to absorb into the wood. Personally, I don't ever sand my pieces before I put finish on them beyond 180. But if you're going to go to 220, you're probably okay with that as well. It's just, 180 gives it a really nice, smooth surface once you get it up to that. And it allows the wood to breathe and open up and absorb the finish you got to put on it today. So that would be my first advice to you. And I'm not telling you there's a right way and a wrong way to do this. This is just how I do it and how I've found success doing it. And so, therefore, hopefully if you do the same thing, you'll find the same kind of success. But don't over prep your wood. You're working against yourself if you do, honestly. Just sand up to 180, 220, and stop, and then put the finish on your piece. Once you put the finish on your piece, and you've built up several layers of that finish, you can then sand the finish up to 320, 420, 600 if you'd like, and then put a final coat on after that to give you that super smooth finish feel that you're looking for. But don't over prep your wood when using a finish that you especially want to absorb into the piece. All right, so the wood prep is done. The finish I'm going to show you today isn't unlike the varnish I showed previously in the video I did, but we're going to be making the wipe-on version of that today, and that's actually a two-step process. But the first step, and that's what we'll start with, obviously, you want equal parts of mineral spirits, boiled linseed oil, or you could use a tung oil if you prefer, and also a resin. And if you want to do an outdoor wipe-on varnish, then go ahead and use like a spar urethane. If you're going to use indoor use, then use regular polyurethane. And yes, the producers of this video wish to apologize because one can was indeed harmed in the making of this video. Anyway, like I said, we're going to mix one part equally of each to begin with. And once we've done that, and have it mixed thoroughly, we're going to flood the surface of the wood with the finish, let it sit for about 15 or 20 minutes, come back and wipe the excess off, and then let this dry. We will probably need 2 to 3 coats of this wipe-on because what we're looking to do is have it absorb into the wood, cure, seal it off so that we can take on the second step in this process. So let me go ahead and mix that up, and we'll get moving on to the next step. All right, I've gone ahead and mixed up 1 ounce of mineral spirits, 1 ounce of boiled linseed oil, and also 1 ounce of the polyurethane resin. Giving me 3 ounces. I don't think I'm going to need much more than that for these coats. This is obviously a small piece of wood. But what we want to do is we just want to flood the surface of this wood with this finish. And, don't be shy about it. Get it on there. I mean, you may not want to pour it right on the wood like I just did. You might want to just go ahead and pour it on a rag and do it that way. But what we're going to do is we're going to let that sit for about, like I said, the next 15, 20 minutes or so. And any parts that's on there that's still a little wet, we're going to go ahead and wipe off the excess and then allow it to cure. And we'll come back and do this process another time, possibly even a third time, before we're actually done. And in between coats, you can take some very fine, like 000 fine steel wool, and just clean up the top of it so that you can take any of those burrs off, and you don't need anything more than this to do so. So let's let that sit for about 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and we'll come back, put another coat on, we'll move on to the final step. Okay, well, it's been 15, 20 minutes here, and so we're just going to take the time to wipe off any of the excess that may remain on this wood. And then we're going to do this another coat one more time. But I want to tell you that the mixture that we're using right now, which is the even mixture 1 to 1 to 1 of both the mineral spirits, boiled linseed oil, and the polyurethane, is just the initial step that we want to do. And the reason for that is the oil is what's going to help this finish, or this part of the finish, really soak into this wood and then eventually cure, so that we can go ahead and do the next mixture, which will involve less linseed oil than the current process. But let's get a second coat on this. It may actually require a third, but I'll have to wait and see. But once again, we're going to let this sit for about 15 to 20 minutes, come back and wipe off any excess. And the more you do this, the more you'll see that there actually will be excess in the subsequent finishes that you put on here, because as you seal the wood off, it's going to puddle more. So let's let this soak. We'll come back another 20 minutes. Actually, I can do this several more times. I'll just come back when I have the final process of this done. I'll let you know how many coats it took. I put the finishing coats on this last night and let it sit overnight. Hit it with some steel wool. So the first step of this process is done. The second step of the process requires you to mix a different type of mixture using the same 3 products. But here's the difference. What I normally do, where I was doing an equal part of each, 1 ounce, 1 ounce, and 1 ounce. What I've mixed up here is 1 ounce of mineral spirits, 1 ounce of the resin polyurethane, and I used about 25%, about 1/4 of an ounce of the oil in this finish here. So it's just a mixture that has less linseed oil in it than it did prior to that. And because the wood has already absorbed all that it can absorb, there really isn't the need to put the entire amount of linseed oil in that we did before. So I've got this sealed off, I've got the finish mixed up. The application process is the same, except for the fact that you don't want to flood the surface of the wood the way we did prior, because the wood is done absorbing everything that it can. We're now looking to just put thin coats and build up a final finish. So that's what I'll do next. I will let you know how many coats it took and give you a final look at this to see if you're going to like it or not. Okay, I put the last coat on this about an hour and a half ago. And just to go back a little bit, the first mixture that we used, I used 4 coats to seal this wood off. It was thirsty wood. But this was the third coat, I believe the final coat that this wood is going to need. I'll let you guys have a look at it here in a sec, but that's how I mix and make my own white bond varnish. It seems to do a pretty good job, at least in my opinion, and it's a heck of a lot cheaper than using that stuff from the big box store. So if you're interested, there you go. I tell you what, I'll give you a before and after of this piece so you can take a look at it, see if it's something you want to use. But until then, you guys take care. Get out in your shops, go make that first cut, and I'll talk to you later. Have a good one.